Because buried beneath the headlines about self-powered systems and open-source blueprints is a document most people would skim past without realizing its implications. A warranty. Ordinary on the surface. Explosive underneath. And according to those who've actually taken the time to read it line by line, it may quietly rewrite what responsibility means in the electric vehicle industry.
Here's why.
For decades, warranties have followed the same unspoken rule. Protect the manufacturer first, reassure the buyer second. Coverage is narrow. Exclusions are broad. And anything truly expensive is often framed as the owner's problem, not the company's. Batteries degrade? Normal wear. Software failure? Update issue. Environmental damage? Not our fault. That's the baseline. But Maxwell's warranty doesn't read like it was written by the same industry. Instead of beginning with limitations, it begins with assumptions, specifically the assumption that the vehicle is meant to last, adapt, and evolve. Certain components aren't just covered for failure, they're covered for performance deviation. If efficiency drops beyond defined margins, it triggers review. If energy behavior changes unexpectedly, diagnostics are included, not as upsells, as obligations. And that detail matters, because it suggests Maxwell isn't just selling a product. It's underwriting a system. Dig deeper, and the wording becomes even more unusual. Coverage references software logic pathways, not just hardware parts. It acknowledges that future updates may alter vehicle behavior and commits to standing behind those changes instead of pushing liability onto the user. In an era where over-the-air update usually means you accepted the risk, this is a sharp departure. More surprising still is how the warranty treats experimentation. Modular components, especially those tied to energy management, aren't immediately voided by modification. Certain alterations are allowed, even expected, as long as they follow documented open-source parameters. That alone breaks a long-standing taboo in automotive manufacturing. Most companies fear modification. Maxwell appears to anticipate it. This raises an uncomfortable question for competitors. If a company allows users to engage more deeply with the system and still stands behind it, what does that say about confidence in the underlying design? Of course, critics argue this is unsustainable. That generous coverage is a marketing strategy, not a long-term commitment. That no manufacturer can afford to warranty complex energy behavior at scale. But that argument assumes Maxwell is operating under the same cost structures. If the vehicle is designed to self-monitor, self-balance, and reduce dependency on external infrastructure, then warranty risk changes shape. Failures become predictable. Data replaces guesswork. Intervention becomes surgical instead of reactive. In other words, the warranty might look bold because the system underneath it is quiet. And this is where the tension starts to build. Because once customers realize that the warranty doesn't just protect against breakdown but against uncertainty, it changes how trust is calculated. Buyers stop asking, "What happens if it fails?" and start asking, "Why aren't others doing this?" That question doesn't stay confined to consumers. It echoes through insurance markets, financing models, fleet procurement contracts, entire ecosystems that depend on risk being someone else's problem. A warranty like this doesn't just support a vehicle, it challenges an industry's favorite escape routes. And yet, what's most telling is what the warranty doesn't promise. It doesn't claim perfection. It doesn't guarantee zero degradation. It doesn't sell immortality. Instead, it promises accountability. If something changes, someone stands behind it. If assumptions break, responsibility doesn't vanish into fine print. That's rare. And as more early adopters begin testing the outer edges of that coverage, intentionally and unintentionally, the real story is just beginning to surface. Early reports suggest that some of the most revealing tests aren't happening in controlled facilities, but in everyday use: long commutes, fleet rotations, harsh weather zones, and unpredictable driving patterns. This is where warranties usually retreat into footnotes, where normal wear becomes the explanation for everything. But in these cases, review processes are reportedly being initiated instead of excuses. What's unfolding is subtle, but important. Rather than treating warranty claims as isolated incidents, Maxwell appears to be treating them as data events. Each claim feeds back into design logic, software thresholds, and future coverage language. The warranty isn't static. It evolves. And that alone is a departure from industry tradition, where warranty documents are frozen the moment ink dries. This dynamic approach introduces something unfamiliar to most automakers: shared risk. Instead of transferring uncertainty entirely to the buyer, some of it remains with the manufacturer. That sounds dangerous until you realize how tightly coupled it is to system transparency. When vehicles constantly report health, performance, and energy behavior, the unknowns shrink. And when unknowns shrink, confidence grows. Fleet operators are watching this closely. For them, warranties aren't just reassurance, they're spreadsheets. Predictable uptime, contained liability, clear response protocols. A warranty that responds intelligently to performance drift, rather than waiting for catastrophic failure, changes procurement math completely. It means less downtime, fewer surprises, and fewer arguments when something goes wrong. Competitors, meanwhile, are placed in an awkward position. Matching this level of coverage without re-engineering their vehicles would be financially reckless. But ignoring it risks appearing evasive by comparison. This creates a pressure loop. To compete on trust, they must first compete on design. And design changes move slower than headlines. Then there's the psychological effect. Owners begin interacting with their vehicles differently. Not cautiously, not defensively, but collaboratively. When a system doesn't punish curiosity, people explore it. When exploration doesn't void protection, innovation spreads outward from the factory floor. This is how ecosystems form. Communities start sharing performance benchmarks, optimization techniques, edge case discoveries. And because the warranty framework acknowledges modular growth instead of suppressing it, those communities don't operate in shadows. They operate in plain sight. All of this feeds into something unexpected: longevity. Not just physical lifespan, but relevance. Vehicles that can adapt, update, and remain supported across changing technology landscapes don't age the same way. Obsolescence slows. Replacement cycles stretch. And when replacement slows, the industry's volume-first business model starts to wobble. That's why this warranty matters beyond legal language. It hints at a different relationship between maker and user. Less transactional, more continuous. A relationship where accountability doesn't end at delivery. It begins there. Still, the biggest question remains unanswered. What happens when this warranty faces its first real crisis? A systemic flaw, a large-scale recall, a failure mode no one predicted. Will the language hold? Will the response match the promise? Because that moment, when theory meets reality, is where reputations are made or destroyed. And as more vehicles roll onto roads, into fleets, and across environments that weren't part of the original assumptions, that moment moves closer. Behind the scenes, preparations are already being made for that moment. Redundancy protocols, escalation pathways, human oversight layered on top of automated diagnostics. Not just to fix problems, but to be seen fixing them. Transparency isn't optional when the promise itself is public. Insiders hint that response time, not fault denial, is the central metric. How quickly anomalies are acknowledged. How clearly responsibility is communicated. How decisively action is taken before narratives spiral out of control. In an age where perception spreads faster than facts, this may be the most strategic part of the coverage. There's also a deeper implication most people overlook. By committing to stand behind evolving software logic, Maxwell implicitly accepts that vehicles are no longer finished products. They're ongoing hypotheses. And warranties in that world don't function like contracts. They function like treaties. Agreements between system designer and system user to navigate uncertainty together. That's unfamiliar territory. It also reframes regulation. Traditional compliance assumes static performance baselines. But if a vehicle's capabilities shift over time, regulators must decide whether they audit the snapshot or the process. A warranty that acknowledges evolution pressures lawmakers to modernize definitions that haven't changed in decades. This creates friction and opportunity. Some jurisdictions will resist. Others will adapt quickly, eager to become testing grounds for next-generation mobility frameworks. Where ideas land first often shapes where influence settles later. And then there's the financial layer. Insurers, typically conservative by design, are beginning to reassess how they price risk for systems that self-report and self-correct. Premiums tied not just to driver behavior, but to platform intelligence. Lending institutions are exploring longer amortization schedules for vehicles that promise supported longevity. Even resale markets start asking different questions. All of this triggered by a warranty document. Which brings us back to the original claim that the most disruptive part of Maxwell's EV might not be what powers it, but what backs it. Because power without accountability is fragile. But accountability, when paired with systems built for adaptability, becomes leverage. The industry senses this, even if it hasn't named it yet. Because when customers begin demanding protection not just from defects, but from uncertainty itself, every manufacturer is forced to respond. Some will tighten language. Others will add marketing gloss. A few will genuinely rethink design. And that divergence will matter. As this warranty continues being tested, by weather, by software updates, by human curiosity, it will quietly answer the question no spec sheet can. Not how advanced is this vehicle? Already, edge cases are beginning to surface. Not catastrophic failures, but subtle inconsistencies. Energy output fluctuations in extreme climates. Sensor drift after months of continuous autonomous assistance. Software behaviors that technically operate within parameters, yet feel wrong to experienced drivers. Traditionally, these are dismissed, logged, deferred, buried under acceptable variants. Here, they're being treated differently. Reports suggest these anomalies trigger internal reviews even before customers file complaints. Predictive alerts escalate silently, weeks ahead of visible impact. Not to alarm owners, but to prepare responses. Replacement components staged. Software patches sandboxed. Human teams briefed in advance. This is warranty as anticipation. And anticipation changes trust dynamics. Owners don't feel like they're proving something went wrong. They feel like they're confirming what the system already suspected. That shift alone reduces friction, the kind that usually turns isolated issues into viral outrage. Now consider scale. As adoption widens across regions with different infrastructure realities, the warranty is forced to confront variables it can't fully model. Power quality inconsistencies. Road conditions that stress components in unintended ways. Cultural usage patterns no design lab predicted. Instead of collapsing under this complexity, the structure seems designed to absorb it. Coverage clauses reportedly expand contextually, not restrictively. Adjusted by environment. Calibrated by data patterns. The warranty becomes geographically intelligent, not globally generic. And that may be its quiet masterstroke. Because global products fail when they ignore local reality. This one appears to be doing the opposite. And then there's the human factor. Technicians trained not just to repair, but to interpret. To read system narratives rather than fault codes. They're not told, fix this part. They're asked, why did this behavior emerge here? Each intervention becomes feedback. Each repair teaches the platform how to reduce future claims. That learning loop feeds forward, which introduces an uncomfortable question for the rest of the industry. If claims make the system better, do failures stop being liabilities and start becoming assets? Most manufacturers aren't structured to answer that. They're optimized to reduce exposure, not extract insight. To close cases, not evolve contracts. And that structural difference may prove harder to replicate than any hardware innovation. All of this circles back to identity. Is Maxwell positioning itself as a car maker or as a managed mobility platform with a vehicle attached? Because warranties for platforms look very different from warranties for products. They're ongoing, conditional, adaptive. And if consumers begin to understand that distinction, really understand it, the shift in expectations could be irreversible. At that point, the question won't be whether other manufacturers can match the coverage. What began as a warranty quietly transforms into a statement of intent. a signal that responsibility doesn't stop at the factory gate and innovation doesn't end at delivery. For Maxwell, backing the vehicle means backing every uncertainty that comes with it, environmental, technological, and human. And that is the real disruption. Not the spreadsheets, not the press releases, but the expectation it sets. Once drivers experience a system that anticipates failure, adapts in public, and shares risk instead of deflecting it, the old model feels inadequate, defensive, outdated. The industry will respond, of course. Some will imitate the language without changing the substance. Others will wait, hoping momentum fades. But a few will recognize what's actually happening here and begin redesigning not just their cars, but their relationship with the people who trust them. Because in the end, the most valuable feature isn't range, acceleration, or software intelligence. It's confidence. Confidence that when something goes wrong, you're not alone. Confidence that progress doesn't come with hidden costs. Confidence that the future you're driving into is being actively supported, not just sold. And long after the headlines move on, long after the early debates settle, that confidence will remain on the road, quiet, resilient, and deeply influential. That's the power of a warranty done differently. And once the world understands that,